or mental impairment? B. Does the impairment limit a major life activity that an average person can perform with little or no difficulty, example, learning, reading, walking, hearing, and C. Does the impairment substantially limit the major life activity compared to the average person? Disability determinations normally are based on information that the student provides to the university, including detailed and current medical documentation, within the last 3 years, from an appropriate professional regarding the nature and severity of the impairment and a description of the student's functional limitations. For students with learning disabilities, attention deficit disorders, and psychological disorders, the director or the associate director for Student Disability Services will identify required tests and contact information for local testers. Once complete documentation is received, the university may consult with external medical professionals to review the assessment and any recommended accommodations. Determining reasonable accommodation. The second step of the process is to determine any appropriate academic modification or adjustment for which the student with a disability qualifies. To determine the appropriateness of particular academic modification or adjustment, the director or the associate director for Student Disability Services considers A. The functional limitations caused by the disability. B. The essential requirements elements of the academic program, course, and/or university-sponsored student life activity. C. The student's past performance with and without reasonable accommodation. D. The student's history of disability-related difficulties in participating in academic and/or university-sponsored student life programs. E. Previous modification or adjustment received by the student in an educational setting, and F. A review of the recommended reasonable accommodation by the appropriate professional. Reasonable accommodations are modifications or adjustments that enable the student with a disability to have equal access to the student's educational program or to the student life activities for which the student is eligible. Academic modifications or adjustments are not predetermined but, instead, are individualized based on the functional limitations caused by the student's disability, academic program requirements, and the student life activities. If necessary, the director or the associate director for Student Disability Services will consult with area deans of students and course instructors to understand the essential requirements elements of a particular course. The academic modification or adjustment must be effective, but need not be state-of-the-art or ideal. For example, a hearing-impaired student receives auxiliary aids and services for classroom activities. Point 2 If both on-campus captioning. 2 Auxiliary aids and services are those items and services which, if provided, a student with a disability would have equal access to the student's educational program or to the student life activities for which the student is eligible. They include such considerations as, but not limited to, adjustable lighting, sound amplification, note takers, ASL interpretation, speech-to-text interpretation, use of a computer for in-class exams and in-class writing assignments, a reduced distraction environment, whenever possible. For in-class exams, extra time for in-class examinations and in-class writing assignments, alternative book and test formats. Auxiliary aids and services do not include personal attendants, individually prescribed devices, readers for personal use or study, or other devices or services of a personal nature such as tutoring or typing. Services and remote captioning services are available and provide comparable access to classroom activities, yet remote captioning services are more consistently available and more cost-effective. The university may make only remote captioning services available to the student. Provisional reasonable accommodation. Provisional academic modification or adjustment may be given when a student has requested a reasonable accommodation, the student has previously received a reasonable accommodation in an educational setting, and the process to determine the appropriate academic modification or adjustment at the university cannot be completed before the start of the quarter. Usually, a provisional academic modification or adjustment is for 1 quarter only, though in exigent circumstances with prior approval, provisional academic modification or adjustment may continue into the next quarter. Receipt of provisional reasonable accommodation does not imply that the student will qualify for reasonable accommodation on a long-term basis. At the conclusion of the reasonable accommodation assessment process, even if the student received provisional reasonable accommodation, it may be determined the student is disabled and a requested academic modification or adjustment will be extended. The student is disabled and a requested academic modification is adjusted to avoid compromise of the essential elements of the academic program, course, and/or university-sponsored student life activity. The student is disabled but the requested academic modification or adjustment is not reasonable, the student does not have a disability within meaning of the law, or that the student is not a qualified student with a disability. Implementation of approved reasonable accommodation. Once disability and reasonable determination have been made, the Director or Associate Director for Student Disability Services will collaborate with the student's area dean of students to implement the appropriate academic modification or adjustment. Both the student and their area dean of students will be notified in writing of the approved academic modification or adjustment. Auxiliary aids and services extended to a student may be adjusted if the existing academic modifications are ineffective or if the student's condition changes. Student Disability Services staff members and the area dean of students will facilitate the implementation of reasonable accommodation. In working with students with disabilities, the usual standards of judgment and assessment of students' overall academic performance apply. Neither the academic community nor the students concerned are well served by applying special or lesser standards of admission, program participation, or of evaluation. Request for review. A student concerned with the disability eligibility or reasonable accommodation determination is advised first to meet and discuss the concerns with the Director for Student Disability Services. The Director for Student Disability Services will follow up in writing within 7 business days of the date of the meeting. If further discussion does not resolve the matter, the student may make a request for review to the Associate Provost and Director, Office for Equal Opportunity Programs. In writing within 10 business days of the date of the written notification. The student may also request a review of the disability eligibility or reasonable accommodation determination without first discussing the concerns with the Director for Student Disability Services. The student should make the request for the review to the Associate Provost in writing within 15 days of the date of the initial written notification of the disability eligibility and reasonable accommodation determination. The Associate Provost will review the appropriate records and documentation and may ask the student for a meeting to clarify the request. The Associate Provost may discuss the request with the Director for Student Disability Services, the Area Dean of Students, and other appropriate professionals. The Associate Provost will communicate a final decision in writing as soon as practicable. The disability eligibility and reasonable accommodation determination remain in effect during the period in which the Associate Provost considers the student's request. For more information visit Graduate Student Parent Policy. We recognize that the decision to begin a family often coincides with the years during which students are engaged full-time in graduate school. By establishing general principles and minimum modifications for students who become parents during their graduate studies, this policy addresses the conflicts and issues that may arise as 2 important milestones, an advanced degree and parenthood, come into play simultaneously. In addition to the academic options outlined below, the university supports a range of student-parent initiatives, including the Family Resource Center, which hosts a drop-in play space and a wide variety of classes, publishes the UChicago Student Parent Resource Guide. EDU Life at Chicago Family Resources, advises student-parent organizations, and maintains a list of spaces convenient for nursing mothers. The University of Chicago also offers need-based, annual child care stipends to eligible PhD student applicants. Students are reminded that in accordance with Illinois state law, mothers may breastfeed in any location, public or private, where they are otherwise authorized to be. The graduate student parent policy includes 3 academic support options described below: 1. Parental relief academic modification, 2. Parental relief leave of absence, and 3. Milestone extensions. As students plan for the birth or arrival of a child, they are encouraged to consider all 3 options in conversation with their advisors, departmental chairs, and area deans of students. Faculty must be realistic about the rate of progress of students experiencing pregnancy and childbirth or taking care of a new child. Together, students and their advisors should arrange a timeline for meeting requirements and make appropriate accommodations for particular circumstances. The success of this graduate student parent policy depends upon full, open, and timely communication and cooperation among the student, the advisor, department chair, and the area dean of students. The ultimate goal of this policy is to allow students the chance to adjust to the extra demands of pregnancy and parenting, while maintaining academic progress. Note that pregnant students choosing academic modification or leave of absence will need to provide verification from a medical provider regarding the need for the modification or leave. Parental relief academic modification. During parental relief academic modification, in which a normally full-time student maintains their full-time status, students will continue to enjoy the university benefits associated with full-time student status, including access to university housing and student health and counseling services, and if they would otherwise be eligible for them, stipends and health insurance coverage. Students will remain eligible for Title IV federal aid, including federal Stafford or Grad Plus loans, and there should be no impact on international students' visa status. Pregnant students, for whom it is medically necessary, may request academic modification for up to the equivalent of 1 quarter. In addition to taking academic modification during pregnancy, students may also choose academic modification for up to the equivalent of 1 quarter to care for a new child. For students who matriculated prior to summer 2016, a quarter of academic modification does not extend a master's or professional student's eligibility for full-time status beyond the maximum allowed period of enrollment for their program, nor a doctoral student's eligibility for full-time student status beyond the total of 12 calendar years from entry in the Ph.D. program. For students who matriculated prior to summer 2016, a quarter of academic modification does not stop the clock on departmental, program, and university academic milestones and requirements. Stipend and health insurance received during a quarter of academic modification count toward the total fellowship award for a student and do not extend the total number of quarters of support beyond a student's original fellowship agreement. The details of particular students' academic modifications should be arranged between students and their departments in consultation with an area dean of students. Some examples of academic modification are described below. Students who are in the early stages of their programs may continue to take classes with academic modification that includes adjustments to course load and deadlines for course assignments, papers, examinations, and other course requirements. In consultation with their area dean of students, students in the early stages of their programs may also be permitted not to take classes during their quarter of parental relief and instead embark on an individualized study plan that will allow them to continue progress toward their degree. If students enroll in classes or seminars during their period of academic modification, class and seminar attendance and participation are expected to the extent permitted by the health of the parent and child. Students with teaching duties are urged to initiate conversations with their department or program chairs and the area dean of students well in advance to arrange for appropriate teaching modifications or to teach in a quarter other than that of the birth or care of the new child. Students receiving tuition or stipends dependent upon laboratory and field research are urged to initiate conversations with their department chairs, lab supervisors, and the area dean of students well in advance to adjust laboratory and research schedules. Students in programs where support is primarily from sources external to the university must follow the rules specified by the granting agencies for absences and leaves. Early conversations with departments and area deans of students are especially important so the university can coordinate as appropriate with granting institutions regarding certain research grant conditions. Further modifications and considerations may be necessary throughout a student's pregnancy or while a student is nursing. Advisors, area deans of students, and students are urged to work together to provide a safe learning environment. Leaves of absence for parental relief. In lieu of taking parental relief, academic modification quarter described above, pregnant graduate students in degree-granting programs of study may choose to take a one-quarter leave of absence if medically necessary. In addition to leave taken during pregnancy, students who become parents during their graduate studies may choose to take another one-quarter leave of absence to care for a new child. Students who are supported by fellowships external to the university must follow the rules specified by the granting agency for absences and leaves. Students who take a parental relief leave of absence may choose to continue to enjoy the university benefits associated with full-time student status, including access to university housing and student health service, and if they would otherwise be eligible for them. Stipends and health insurance coverage. Students who accept UChicago stipend and health insurance during a parental relief leave of absence are expected to devote themselves to the purpose of the leave, parenting, and as such may not undertake full-time employment or study elsewhere. Before deciding to request a leave of absence, students are encouraged to consult with their financial aid office because eligibility for Title IV federal aid, including federal Stafford and Grad PLUS loans, may be affected. Taking a leave may also have implications for a student's immigration status. And international students considering a leave should work with their area dean of students and with the Office of International Affairs to explore options and to make arrangements so that the leave can be as minimally disruptive as possible. As with the quarters of academic modification, for students who matriculated prior to summer 2016, a parental relief leave of absence does not extend a doctoral student's eligibility for full-time student status beyond the total of 12 calendar years from entry in the Ph.D. program. The leave of absence does, however, stop the clock on departmental, program, and university academic milestones and requirements for master's, professional, and doctoral students. The clock resumes when the student returns to full-time status. Stipend and health insurance received during a leave of absence count toward the total fellowship award for a student and do not extend the total number of quarters of support beyond a student's original fellowship agreement. Milestone extensions. Whether or not students receive academic modification or take a parental relief leave of absence, students in degree-granting graduate programs may request a one-quarter extension for department, program, and university milestones and requirements due to pregnancy or the demands of parenting a new child. For example, if a doctoral student's department requires petition to candidacy by the end of the fourth year, the student parent may request one additional quarter to prepare for the petition to candidacy. As with academic modification and leave of absence, for students who matriculated prior to summer 2016, milestone extensions do not extend a master's or professional student's eligibility for full-time status beyond the maximum allowed period of enrollment for their program nor a doctoral student's eligibility for full-time student status beyond the total of 12 calendar years from entry in the Ph.D. program. Dependent privileges. Privileges may be extended to a student's spouse, same-gendered domestic partner and/or dependent child for the following: access to the university student health insurance plan, access to fitness recreation, access to campus libraries, receive a university ID card. If a student wishes to enroll their spouse, same-gendered domestic partner and/or child in USHIP, the student will need to complete the online USHIP enrollment process each academic year for each individual needing insurance coverage by the appropriate deadlines. Students will be informed by the insurance carrier of any documentation needed to verify dependent status. In order to obtain access to recreational facilities, libraries, and/or ID cards, the student will need to present appropriate documentation at the appropriate office below. Athletics and Recreation, Ratner Athletic Center, 5530 South Ellis Avenue. Front Desk. Library and ID Card, Regenstein Library, ID Privileges Office, 1100 East 57th Street, 1st floor. A student must be married or be in a civil union in order to receive privileges for their spouse or partner. Following the landmark 2015 U.S. Supreme Court ruling legalizing same-sex marriage, the university revised its same-gender domestic partner privileges policy to reflect the change in law. As such, privileges will be extended to a student's same-gender domestic partner only if the domestic partnership was registered with the university prior to July 1, 2017. Student employment. Students in a full-time registration status are expected to focus their attention and efforts principally on their academic work and may undertake employment, other than teaching and research related to their field of study, only secondary to their student status. The university will not employ full-time students for more than 20 hours per week during quarters of full-time registration without the express permission of an area dean of students. Students may request authorization from their area dean of students to work more than 20 hours per week, and exceptions are governed by the policies of individual divisions and schools. Teaching and research are critical to the university's academic enterprise and will therefore be prioritized in considering exceptions. Graduate students in a part-time registration status may be employed by the university without the limitation on the hours worked that are imposed on full-time registered students. International students in J1 or F1 status should contact the Office of International Affairs with any questions regarding their employment eligibility and to discuss necessary arrangements if they seek to be employed for more than 20 hours per week with approval from an area dean of students. For more information, please see International students. While employed by the university, the student is covered by the university's human resources policies and procedures and may be disciplined or terminated from employment for policy non-compliance or inadequate performance. Students bear the responsibility of reviewing the employee handbook and becoming acquainted with the university's HR policies, all of which are available online at HR's webpage. While employed at the university, the student may see personal or confidential information, including HR records, student records, donor and alumni information and, if employed at the medical center, patient records. Confidential information a student learns at work must remain confidential. Unauthorized disclosure of confidential information may result in discipline, including termination and student disciplinary charges. Before accepting a position, a student should understand the duties and responsibilities of the position. A student employee is expected to follow payroll procedures carefully and to report hours worked accurately and in a timely manner. The student should discuss problems with or questions about the job with the immediate supervisor. A student who decides to leave a job is expected to give the supervisor at least 2 weeks' notice. Questions regarding student employment policies should be addressed to the student supervisor or area dean of students. Alcohol and other drugs. All members of the university community are responsible for being familiar and complying with the requirements of federal and Illinois statutes and Chicago ordinances regarding the consumption, possession, and sale of alcohol and other drugs. The university expects each member of the community to be responsible for their own conduct and the consequences of that conduct. Various federal and state laws prohibit the possession, distribution, and use of controlled substances, unless in compliance with licensing requirements or a doctor's prescription. Moreover, Illinois law prohibits the consumption and possession of alcohol by persons under the age of 21 and the supplying of alcohol to any person under the age of 21. Additionally, Illinois law prohibits the sale of alcoholic beverages except by those licensed to sell such beverages. Illinois law and city ordinances also prohibit public intoxication, operation of a vehicle or bicycle under the influence of alcohol or other intoxicants, and consumption of alcohol in a public place. Violation of these or other laws relating to drugs and alcohol may result in probation, fines, imprisonment, and a permanent criminal record. Violation of drug laws may also result in civil seizure or forfeiture of property used in connection with the offense. Additionally, a violation may result in university disciplinary action. For more detailed information about the university's drug and alcohol policies, federal and state statutes with respect to illicit drug trafficking and possession, and state statutes regarding alcohol use by minors, please consult the university's Annual Security and Fire Safety Report. The university recognizes both alcohol and drug abuse as potential health, safety, and security problems. The university expects faculty, students, and staff to assist in maintaining a university environment free from the harmful effects of alcohol and other drugs. The university prohibits all students and employees from the unlawful manufacture, possession, use, distribution, sale, or purchase of alcohol and other drugs on university premises or as part of any university activity, and from working under the influence of alcohol or illicit drugs. The only exception to this provision applies to moderate consumption and/or possession of alcohol on university premises at approved functions by those legally permitted to consume or distribute alcohol. Such functions must comply with all applicable university guidelines. In addition, all student employees are required to be able to perform their jobs. If an employee may be impaired by medication taken according to a doctor's prescription or the medication's directions, the employee is expected to discuss it with their supervisor. Besides the legal restrictions, the following university guidelines govern events on campus at which alcoholic beverages are served. Alcoholic beverages may not be served at any event at which undergraduates are present unless prior written approval has been obtained at least 2 weeks in advance from the Center for Leadership and Involvement or the appropriate area dean of students. To obtain a copy of the guidelines and request form, contact the Center for Leadership and Involvement or visit the website at all areas of the university that wish to serve alcohol in a university public area at an event at which graduate or professional students are likely to be in attendance must, at least 1 week in advance of the event, consult with the appropriate area dean of students and the unit responsible for the particular space allocation, and must designate a faculty or staff member to be present and responsible for the event. Recognized graduate and professional student organizations must obtain written authorization to hold such events through the Center for Leadership and Involvement or their area dean of students. All areas of the university which will serve alcoholic beverages at a function when students will be present must have the servers or a responsible event representative of the function successfully complete alcohol risk management training offered by Health Promotion and Wellness and b. Present the entire length of the function, details at. Sufficient amounts of non-alcoholic beverages must be available at all functions where alcohol is available. Further, appropriate quantities of non-salty food must be served at all such events. There may be no reference to the availability of alcohol in any publicity, including electronic notices, for a university event. University officials or agents of the university have the authority to prohibit attendees from bringing alcoholic beverages to a function or into a building, including events held in outdoor areas such as the quads. Such beverages may be confiscated by the official or agent. Other drugs will never be permitted at functions. Besides these general standards of conduct, areas of the university may also have specific drug and alcohol policies relating to their activities and providing additional details, for example, college housing athletics, or the Center for Leadership and Involvement. Please consult them for details. Health risks. The use of illicit drugs and the abuse of alcohol and prescription drugs have potential adverse health consequences that may be permanent. These consequences include disorders and dysfunctions that affect the central nervous system, reproductive functioning, cardiovascular and pulmonary systems, and endocrine functioning. Specifically, There are both short and long-term effects on cognition, memory, retention, information processing, coordination, and athletic and academic performance. The use of illicit drugs and the abuse of alcohol also affect emotional equilibrium, mental well-being, and the ability to make critical decisions. Such use also impairs judgment, which in turn increases one's vulnerability and risk-taking behavior, including engaging in unprotected sex, which may lead to exposure to HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases and unplanned pregnancy. The chronic use and abuse of illicit drugs and alcohol have been shown to cause adverse permanent changes in most of the biological systems studied. These changes can lead to severe impairment, disability, and premature death. For a further discussion of the health risks of the use of illicit drugs and the abuse of alcohol and prescription drugs, see the university's Annual Security and Fire Safety Report. Sanctions. Besides legal consequences, the unlawful possession, use, or distribution of illicit drugs and alcohol and any violation of the university alcohol and other drug policy by a student or employee may result in appropriate discipline under the student disciplinary system or the employee corrective action procedure. For students, sanctions include removal from the college housing, discharge from student employment, and probation, suspension, or expulsion from the university. For employees, sanctions include suspension, termination of employment, disqualification from future employment and prohibition from accessing university property. The university may refer students or employees for criminal investigation and prosecution. Specific areas of the university, example, college housing, athletics, may also take action based on a violation of this general university policy and their specific policies. The university retains full and final discretion on whether, when, and under what conditions a student may be reinstated or an employee may be returned to employment after an instance of alcohol abuse and improper drug use. Student organizations that violate this policy are also subject to sanctions, including probation and removal of recognized student organization status. The particular sanction in a given case will depend on such factors as the nature of the violation, the seriousness of the offense, and the prior record of the individual or organization, and may include the successful completion of an approved rehabilitation or chemical dependency treatment program. Under federal law, student employees who are convicted under any criminal drug statute for a violation occurring either on university property or during working hours must notify their area dean of students within 5 days of the date of conviction. A conviction includes any plea or finding of guilty, any plea of nolo contendere, and/or any imposition of a fine, jail sentence, or other penalty. Under federal law, if the convicted employee is working on a project funded through a federal grant or contract, the university is required to notify the relevant federal contracting or granting agency within 10 days of receiving such notice of conviction. Counseling, treatment, and referral. Students who believe they may have an alcohol or drug problem are strongly encouraged to seek assistance through resources available at the university. Students should seek aid through the Student Counseling Service, the Student Health Service, their area dean of students, or the Office of Campus and Student Life. Such contacts will be kept confidential, except as required by law or to the extent necessary to protect the immediate health, safety, or security of the individual or others. The university has the right to take any necessary action to protect the health, safety, and security of the affected individual and others, including deciding whether, when, and under what conditions a student may be reinstated or an employee may be returned to employment after an instance of alcohol abuse or improper drug use. The Student Health Service and/or the Student Counseling Service are staffed by professional counselors and physicians who are trained to evaluate, diagnose, treat, and refer individuals who have a problem in avoiding the use of illicit drugs and the abuse of alcohol. Individuals requiring inpatient detoxification and/or rehabilitative services are referred to institutions and hospitals in the local community which specialize in these types of services. Initial evaluation, consultation, counseling, and treatment on an outpatient basis are available through the Student Health Service and/or the Student Counseling Service. The costs of such treatment and referrals may be covered in whole or in part by the individual's health insurance. Please note that use of these or other treatment programs does not preclude appropriate disciplinary action and sanctions by the university if the individual violates the university alcohol or other drug policy and any other university policy or rule. Students with any questions regarding this policy should contact Campus and Student Life or their area dean of students. Networking and Information Technology Policies. Overview. Information about technology services may be found at information specific to new students may be found at Acceptable Use. The University of Chicago provides information technology for educational, research, and administrative applications by its students, faculty, and staff. Using the values of open discourse and institutional restraint as guideposts, the university's acceptable use policy articulates and promotes the ethical, legal, and secure use of information technology by all members of the University of Chicago community and confirms the university's responsibilities in connection with accessing such information. Note that any violation of a University of Chicago IT policy may lead to disciplinary action, and in some cases, legal action. Please acquaint yourself with the policies governing the acceptable use of university IT resources at DMCA violations. Digital Millennium Copyright Act violations are a special case of acceptable use policy. Violation. The university's file sharing policy can be found at the procedures for DMCA violations are as follows. The first time that IT Services receives a DMCA complaint for a student, IT Services notifies the student. A student who receives a violation notice must, within the period of time specified in the notice, acknowledge the notice, state that a copy of the DMCA complaint was received, and agree to abide by the EAUP in the future. If IT Services does not receive a response to its violation notice within the specified time, IT Services will suspend the student's ability to connect a computer to the university network. The student is expected to rectify any problems outlined in the complaint and to cease using the university's network for purposes of copyright infringement. A second DMCA notice involving the same student results in more serious action. The university immediately suspends the student's network privileges pending a meeting with a representative of the Office of Campus and Student Life regarding the nature of the violations. The student's area dean of students may summon the student as well. At the meeting with the representative from the Office of Campus and Student Life, the student must agree not to repeat the violation. A third violation of the DMCA results in immediate suspension of network privileges pending student disciplinary action. Disciplinary action in the case of a third violation will be the convening of an area disciplinary committee, and the sanctions available to the committee include suspension or expulsion from the university. The procedures for student discipline are described in the Student Manual of the University Policies and Regulations at. Under the DMCA, copyright holders may file a lawsuit against the violators. If the university receives a valid subpoena seeking the identity of the offender for such a lawsuit, the university will comply with the subpoena. Please information on the Digital Millennium Copyright Act as it applies at the university. Also, keep in mind that laws, policies, and procedures change frequently in this domain, so please consult the DMCA website regularly for current policies and procedures. Wireless devices. Students residing in the residence halls should be aware of specific policies relating to computers and networking in University House system. In particular, residents are not permitted to install personal wireless network devices such as Wi-Fi routers or extenders to the campus wired infrastructure. See the network access instruction on the college housing site for more information. Official communication by electronic mail. Official communications from the university are sent via electronic mail to each student CNET ID at Chicago. EDU email account. Students are responsible for reading email sent to this official address. For information about email and forwarding options, please visit Inventions and Discoveries. Occasionally, students that use the facilities or resources of the university will make discoveries or inventions that have commercial application or other significance. Such inventions are most likely to occur in a laboratory or research team environment, but can in principle happen in many ways. University Statute 18 governs the policy with respect to discoveries and inventions. Statute 18 identifies the inventions, discoveries, and software for which the university becomes the owner. It may grant the university the right to students' inventions that were supported by substantial aid from university resources or from funds the university administers. It does not give the university ownership of the work of students merely because they are enrolled at the university or because they develop the work while they are in residence. Inventors, discoverers or software authors who create intellectual property with commercial potential using substantial university support, however, have an obligation to disclose their discovery or creation even if there is uncertainty about the eventual value of the property. Questions about the reach of this policy in particular situations and invention disclosures themselves should be directed in the first instance to UChicago Tech. In case of doubt, an invention disclosure should be filed as soon as a potential discovery or creation is realized. Students who have intellectual property claimed by the university and think the discovery or creation should be exempt from Statute 18 because the work did not meet its conditions may present a case to the Committee on Intellectual Property. A representative from the Office of Campus and Student Life will sit in on the committee's deliberations. After hearing such cases, the committee will make a recommendation to the president as to the appropriate ownership of the intellectual property. Safety and appropriate use of facilities. Building occupancy limits and access. To maintain a physically safe environment for all members of the university community, the number of people participating in a protest or demonstration must be considered and adhere to the occupancy limits of the protest or demonstration area. Walkways and entrances to and in buildings must always remain open to allow others safe access and egress as well as a clearly designated pathway through the area. Policy on firearms, other lethal weapons, fireworks, and dangerous objects and materials. Policy Statement. The University of Chicago is committed to providing a safe and secure learning, working and living environment. Subject to the exceptions in Section 3, the university prohibits the possession, use or storage of firearms, other lethal weapons, fireworks, and other dangerous objects or materials by anyone, on any property owned, leased or controlled by the university. Including but not limited to all buildings, land, parking areas, sidewalks and common areas, in any vehicle, owned, leased or controlled by the university regardless of location, at any external, university-sponsored activities or events. And employed by the university when conducting university business anywhere. 2. Definitions. Firearm means any device, regardless of its name, that is designed to expel a projectile by the action of an explosion, expansion of gas or escape of gas, any imitation or replica firearm, and any firearm that has been rendered inoperative. Other lethal weapons consist of instruments, material or devices that ordinarily could result in or are readily capable of causing serious bodily injury or death, including replicas of the same. These include but are not limited to ammunition, gunpowder, BB guns, pellet guns, paint guns, stun guns, flare guns, blow guns, clubs, slingshots, blackjacks, swords, sabers, daggers, machetes, hatchets, crossbows, nunchucks, throwing stars, batons, billy clubs, and knives except those used as common eating utensils and personal use knives with folding blades 4 inches or less. Fireworks include but are not limited to firecrackers, rockets, Roman candles, cherry bombs, toy cannons and toy guns in which explosive materials are used, fire balloons, or other devices containing any combustible or explosive substance used to propel another object. Other dangerous objects or materials means any object or material designed to inflict injury or death, including items that pose a potential hazard to the safety or health of others, and unauthorized hazardous materials or chemicals. 3. Exceptions. A. Law enforcement. This policy permits the possession, use and storage of firearms and other lethal weapons by sworn law enforcement personnel, authorized security officers and armed guards possessing, using and storing such devices as required by their job. B. University work. This policy permits lawful possession, use and storage of knives, other lethal weapons, and dangerous objects or materials within the scope of a person's employment by the university or work as a university contractor. For example, this policy does not prohibit the authorized possession, use and storage of radioactive materials in connection with laboratory research, or knives and other lethal weapons in connection with food preparation or consumption, or saws or shearing devices by facilities services employees or contractors. C. Sponsored programs. This policy permits the lawful possession, use and storage of other lethal weapons in connection with regularly scheduled and university-authorized educational, recreational or training programs, where the weapon is required for or is a central part of the curriculum or activity. D. Ceremonies, parades and performances. This policy permits the lawful possession, use and storage of imitation firearms or lethal weapons by participants in any university-sponsored ceremony, parade or theatrical performance, provided that an academic appointee or staff employee has expressly agreed to supervise their use as part of their regular job responsibilities and advance written approval has been obtained from the university's chief of police. Note: imitation firearms and lethal weapons should only be possessed, used and stored in settings where it is unlikely that their purpose would be misunderstood. Also, easily identifiable toys, such as brightly colored or clear water guns, are accepted from this policy. 3. Many common objects and materials may be used or modified for use as a weapon. In deciding whether such an object or material is a weapon under this policy, the university will use reasoned judgment when considering, among other factors, the time, place and circumstances surrounding the use and possession of the common object or tool, including the explanation for its possession or use and whether it has been modified or altered to make it more effective as a weapon. E. Parking lots and non-university vehicles. This policy permits a person carrying a validly licensed concealed firearm under Illinois law to park a non-university-owned or controlled vehicle they are driving or in which they are a passenger in any university-owned, leased or occupied parking area or lot, but only if the firearm and any associated ammunition are maintained, at all times, in a case within the locked vehicle or in a locked container out of plain view and within the vehicle. A case includes a glove compartment or console that completely encloses the firearm and ammunition, the trunk of the vehicle, or a firearm carrying box, shipping box, or other container. Also, the person may carry the concealed firearm in the immediate area surrounding the vehicle within the parking lot, but only for the limited purpose of storing or retrieving it from the trunk and only if the person unloads the firearm before exiting the vehicle. The university retains the authority to designate certain university-owned, leased or occupied parking areas or lots as restricted areas in which all vehicles containing firearms are prohibited. In those instances, the university will post signage indicating the prohibition. F. At home. Nothing in this policy prohibits a university employee who is conducting university business while at home from possessing or storing firearms, other lethal weapons, fireworks, and other dangerous objects or materials. Nothing in this policy prohibits possession of knives in university housing for common eating utensils and food preparation purposes. G. Special exceptions. In addition, the university's chief of police is authorized to grant additional exceptions either in connection with extraordinary emergency situations or in response to written requests and as follows. Written requests must be made at least 10 days in advance of the date on which possession, use or storage of the prohibited item is proposed. Using reasoned judgment, the Chief of Police will consider each request based on the circumstances associated with the request. The Chief of Police will issue their determination and any associated restrictions or conditions in writing. 4. Violations and reporting. Any student or group that violates this policy will be subject to discipline under the appropriate university disciplinary system. Contractors who violate this policy will be subject to contract termination. Staff employees, academic appointees, visiting academics, postdoctoral researchers, employees of affiliates and volunteers who violate this policy will be subject to discipline using the disciplinary processes applicable to each category. Employees of affiliates, volunteers, visitors or guests who violate this policy will be subject to the university's ban policy. Discipline includes removal from the housing system, suspension, expulsion, termination of employment or appointment, revocation of volunteer status, and a ban from accessing university property. In addition, because conduct that violates this policy may also constitute a crime, the university may refer any violation of this policy to law enforcement officials, and thus persons who violate this policy may be arrested and prosecuted. Any person with knowledge of a policy violation is expected to communicate promptly with the University of Chicago Police Department, the Office of the Dean of Students in the university, the Office of the Provost, or Human Resources. Reports also may be made using the university's concerning behavior reporting form. Non-smoking policy. This policy covers the smoking of all tobacco, nicotine and other products, and includes cigars, cigarettes, smokeless cigarettes and other such delivery systems. In accordance with regulations promulgated by the City of Chicago and the State of Illinois, the University of Chicago is a smoke-free environment. Therefore, smoking is prohibited in all buildings. Owned and operated by the University of Chicago, which includes dormitories. Smoking is permitted outside a building but not within 15 feet of the entrance. For residential properties owned by the university and managed by Facility Services, smoking is allowed in private dwellings, but not the public areas of these buildings. Bicycle policy. Bicycles should not be locked or secured to handrails, sign posts, lamp posts, trees, fences, or to any other location that obscures the free ingress-egress of any building, stairway or pathway. Bicycles found secured to any object other than the bicycle racks are subject to removal by Facility Services. Impounded bicycles will be stored by the Facility Services for 10 days, during which time a bicycle can be reclaimed by calling 77370288181. After 10 days, the bicycle will be donated to charity. Parking. First-year students in the college are not permitted to bring motor vehicles to campus. All other students may have motor vehicles and are responsible for making appropriate parking arrangements. Minors. The university encourages authorized campus visits by minors under the age of 18 for participation in university classes, events and programs, making decisions about their academic future, and the authorized use of university facilities. Children who are not authorized participants in university classes, events and programs must be accompanied by a parent or guardian at all times. Children thus are not permitted on campus or in university buildings as an alternative to appropriate child care, when the child is too ill to attend school, or when the child needs a quiet study space, etc. Likewise, due to safety concerns, unsupervised children may not play on campus grounds, roam university buildings, or sit unaccompanied on campus or in university buildings. For the university's full policy on the safety of children in university programs, go here. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act Policy. Purpose. As reflected in the university's Code of Business Conduct, university community members are required to act ethically, honestly, and with integrity and comply with applicable laws at all times when conducting university activities within the United States or abroad. This includes compliance with the anti-bribery provisions of U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and similar applicable anti-bribery laws of other countries with which the university conducts international activities. As a general matter, the FCPA prohibits bribery of foreign officials in order to obtain or retain business or otherwise secure an improper advantage. Although this basic prohibition appears straightforward, the terms used in the FCPA have specific definitions that apply more broadly than this general statement suggests. Accordingly, this policy is intended to assist university members with satisfying their FCPA obligations and supplements, but does not replace or otherwise alter the principles and obligations set forth in the university's Code of Business Conduct and existing policies. Policy Statement. Bribery prohibited. University community members are prohibited from engaging in bribery of a foreign official in connection with university business or other university activities. University community members must also be aware of, and comply with, applicable anti-bribery laws of the foreign countries with which they carry out international activities. Such foreign laws may include, but are not limited to, the UK Bribery Act, the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance of Hong Kong, and India's Prevention of Corruption Act. Since some of these foreign laws are in certain instances stricter than their FCPA counterpart, university community members should consult with the Office of Legal Counsel regarding the specific requirements of these foreign anti-bribery laws as needed. Facilitating payments to foreign officials are permitted under the FCPA but may nonetheless violate local anti-bribery laws of the foreign jurisdiction, e.g., the UK Bribery Act. Therefore, facilitating payments are not permitted under this policy unless the payment is necessary to prevent risk of injury or harm to oneself or another person, or the Office of Legal Counsel has determined the specific payment is permissible under the FCPA and the applicable laws of the local jurisdiction. Key definitions. Bribery means the direct or indirect offering, giving, directing or promising to another person anything of value with the intention to induce or reward a foreign official to undertake an official act or decision. Violate his or her official duties, use his or her influence to effect an act or decision of the government, or give an improper advantage, or engaging in without the aforementioned intention to induce or reward, but which nonetheless could reasonably be interpreted as such an inducement or reward. See the FAQs that follow this policy for examples of common forms of bribery. Foreign official means any employee, officer or agent of a foreign government, political candidate of a foreign party, or employee of a foreign government-owned or controlled commercial enterprise, university, research institution, healthcare facility, or instrumentality. Public international organization, or foreign political party. University community member means faculty, other academic appointees, postdoctoral appointees, staff, and other employees of the university and its affiliates, university students, members of the board of trustees or directors of the university and its affiliates. Consultants. Vendors, contractors and third parties doing business with, or on behalf of, the university and its affiliates, and volunteers associated with the university. Due diligence of agents, vendors and other third parties. When entering into a relationship with a third party that may interact with a foreign official on behalf of the university. University community members should complete sufficient due diligence to confirm that the retained individual or organization does not have a history of corrupt payments, and understands and agrees that they are not authorized to engage in bribery on the university's behalf. The level of due diligence required will vary depending on the level of risk involved in the underlying arrangement or transaction. University community members should ensure that the third parties described above do not have a history of violations of anti-bribery laws, provide them with a copy of this policy, and regularly audit their activities to ensure ongoing compliance. Any agreements with these types of third parties should include provisions that they will comply with the FCPA and all other applicable local anti-bribery laws. A sample agreement provision is included here as Exhibit A. Risk assessment and mitigation. University community members must assess the risk of bribery in the international activities under their purview and take appropriate care to prevent and detect bribery and ensure compliance with university policies. Certain countries have a high incidence of corruption, and particular care should be taken when undertaking activities in or involving those countries. For information regarding high-risk countries, see the Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index available at. Depending on the individual circumstances, appropriate steps may involve additional training of employees and other third parties concerning this policy, conducting appropriate due diligence before engaging third-party vendors, agents, or partners. Ensuring that contracts contain anti-bribery and compliance with law provisions, and requesting guidance from the Office of Global Engagement and the Office of Legal Counsel before expanding operations into a new geographic location. See the FAQs that follow this policy for additional suggested strategies to mitigate risk of an FCPA or other policy violation. Failure to take appropriate steps to prevent and detect bribery creates legal risk for the university and potential personal liability for the individuals involved. Procurement and record-keeping requirements. University community members must comply with the university's procurement and record-keeping requirements as well as its financial controls for cash and non-cash transactions. Consequences of violations. Violations of this policy may result in appropriate disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment or other relationships with the university. Conduct constituting a violation may also expose the university and its community members to criminal or civil penalties in the United States and abroad. Non-retaliation. The university prohibits retaliation against any person for making a report in good faith or cooperating. In an investigation in connection with this policy, individuals who take retaliatory action will be subject to corrective action up to and including termination of employment. Questions and reporting concerns. For further information regarding this policy, contact the Office of Legal Counsel at 7027237. In general, if you are not sure whether a particular action may violate this policy, you should avoid that action unless otherwise advised by the Office of Legal Counsel. Known or suspected violations of this policy must be reported to the point of contact or hotline in accordance with the university whistleblower policy, or directly to the Office of Legal Counsel. Additional information. Additional University of Chicago policies may provide further guidance on issues or activities addressed in this policy including, but not limited to, business conduct at the University of Chicago, gifts to non-employees, gifts to other not-for-profit and charitable organizations. Policy of procurement and engagement of services and financial services policies. See also the FAQs that follow this policy. Exhibit A, Sample Provisions for Third-Party Providers. Compliance with anti-corruption laws. Shall comply with all applicable anti-bribery and corruption laws, including but not limited to the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and the laws of any country in which will be providing services on behalf of the. Shall not, in connection with any activities contemplated in this agreement, transfer anything of value, directly or indirectly, to a foreign official or government official, or other private persons or entities working on behalf of any government in order to obtain any improper benefit or advantage for the or for on the S behalf. Warrants that no compensation paid or student manual, university policies and regulations payable to has been or will be used to pay any bribe or kickback in violation of anti-corruption laws. Frequently asked questions, FCPA policy. 1. What anti-bribery laws are applicable to the university's international activities? The law most relevant to university international activities is the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, but many countries and jurisdictions also have their own anti-bribery laws, which may be more restrictive than the FCPA. You should be aware of any applicable local anti-bribery laws before engaging in these activities with individuals or entities located overseas. Anti-bribery laws of the jurisdictions in which the university conducts activities include but are not limited to UK Bribery Act, the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance of Hong Kong, the Criminal Law and Anti-Unfair Competition Law of the People's Republic of China, the Prevention of Corruption Acts of each of India and Bangladesh, and the Egyptian Penal Code. Contact the Office of Legal Counsel for more information about the respective anti-bribery and corruption laws of foreign jurisdictions that may apply to university activities. 2. What is the FCPA? The FCPA is a federal law, enforced by the U.S. Department of Justice, which prohibits payments, gifts, or even offers of anything of value to a foreign official for the purpose of influencing the official or otherwise securing any improper advantage in obtaining, retaining, or directing business. 3. How does the FCPA apply to the university? Certain provisions of the FCPA apply to all domestic concerns and their officers, employees, and agents. Thus, the FCPA applies to the university, its employees, and all third parties working on the university's behalf, such as vendors and consultants. 4. Can a payment be made to a third party as a way to avoid a violation of the FCPA? No. The FCPA prohibits direct and indirect payments. Therefore, one cannot make a payment to a third party if he or she knows that some or all of that payment will be used in a way that violates the FCPA. 5. Are there any payments to foreign officials that fall outside the FCPA? The FCPA permits facilitation payments to a foreign official for purposes of facilitating or expediting or securing the performance of routine, non-discretionary government action. However, because applicable local anti-bribery laws may not include such an exception and given the difficulty in determining when this exception is available under the FCPA, the university policy prohibits the making of facilitation payments unless the Office of Legal Counsel has determined the payment is permissible or where necessary to prevent personal injury or harm. 6. For which types of university activities do I most need to consider the university's FCPA policy? University members should consult the FCPA policy when engaging in activities comparable to the examples below or other activities involving foreign officials. Collaborations with foreign institutions where the partner institution is owned or run by its government. Events hosted by the university that include foreign officials. Projects, sponsored or otherwise, that involve interactions with foreign officials. Activities that require the hiring of agents or consultants who will interact with foreign officials, or university educational programs in which foreign officials may enroll. 7. Who qualifies as a foreign official under the FCPA and university policy? A foreign official is defined very broadly under the FCPA. It includes employees and agents, at all levels, of a foreign government, state-owned or controlled company or instrumentality, foreign political party or public international organization as well as a candidate for foreign political office. The following are deemed foreign officials for purposes of the university's FCPA policy. Administrators and faculty at foreign state universities. Advisors to ministries, government agencies, or government officials. Members of government committees or panels. Healthcare professionals at government-owned or controlled hospitals' healthcare facilities. Members of a royal family. Police officers, and customs officials. 8. Can I pay a foreign official for provision of legitimate services? Yes, payments for legitimate services are acceptable. But care should be given to avoid payments that could be construed as having a corrupt purpose. To that end, each payment for goods or services should follow the university's procurement policies and processes and be documented with the appropriate detail such that it is clear that the transaction was bona fide in all respects. 9. What are some examples of common forms of bribery? Anything of value can serve as the basis of a bribe. Examples of common forms of payments or benefits that may constitute a bribe if coupled with an intent to improperly influence or reward the beneficiary include, but are not limited to: unreasonable gifts, meals, entertainment, travel expenses or other hospitality; unwarranted rebates or excessive commissions; unwarranted allowances or expense reimbursements; charitable contributions to organizations owned or recommended by a foreign official or owned by his or her family members; contributions to a foreign political party or candidate for political office at the request of a third party; uncompensated use of university services or facilities, and promises of admission or acceptance to the university with respect to the foreign official or his or her family member. A payment or benefit may be deemed unreasonable, unwarranted or inappropriate under the FCPA and the university's policy if the arrangement violates other applicable university policies and/or a third party could reasonably perceive that the purpose of the arrangement is to influence a foreign official's decision or reward the improper performance of his or her duties. 10. When hosting a foreign official, what are ways to reduce the risk that an act is viewed as having a corrupt purpose? When hosting a foreign official, it may be appropriate to pay for the official's reasonable lodging and dining expenses so long as these payments are not being done to improperly influence the official. Activities such as giving a lavish meal or a gift that does not have a university connection or providing benefits to family members of an official may not be considered reasonable, and, therefore, may be more likely to be construed as having a corrupt purpose. When presenting a gift, be sure to refer to the university's policy on gifts to non-employees and consider presenting the gift publicly, making clear that it is an expression of university hospitality and/or token of its appreciation. 11. Does the policy prevent me from giving gifts to my foreign colleagues? Gifts beyond a modest value may not be given under the university's policy on gifts to non-employees. Check with your supervisor and/or the Office of Legal Counsel before giving larger gifts to persons who might be considered foreign officials. 12. What are examples of how the FCPA and the university policy apply to university activity? Example 1. You would like to enter into a collaborative research agreement with a foreign state-controlled institution. The foreign officials have not yet agreed to enter into the collaboration but would like to visit you at the university to discuss it further. You advise them that you have made reservations and arranged payment for them and their spouses at a luxury hotel in Chicago, a driver and limousine to transport them to campus, and tickets for them to attend a Chicago sports event while in town. In determining whether the arrangements you have made may violate the FCPA and university policy, you should consider whether a payment or something of value is offered, promised, or given to a foreign official for a corrupt or improper purpose. In this case, and appear to have been satisfied. Even if you did not have a corrupt intent, the same may be determined from a consideration of the circumstances. Specifically, someone could reasonably conclude that the luxury hotel accommodations, limousine service and tickets were extravagant and not reasonably related to the purpose of the visit and therefore must have been offered in order to improperly induce the foreign officials to enter into the agreement. Covering the expenses for the official spouses, whose presence is unrelated to the business purpose of the trip, is also suggestive of improper motive. Example 2. As part of your planning to conduct field research next month in a foreign country, you learn that the research team must obtain a research permit from the foreign government. You have completed the application process, submitted the required documents and paid the necessary fees. However, as a result of a backlog at the permitting office, you learn that your permit will not be issued for several months. A local agent in the foreign country advises you that he can make a one-time cash payment to a clerk in the permitting office to ensure that the clerk files and stamps the research permit applications for expeditious review. The clerk has no discretion with respect to filing and stamping the research permit application once the filing fees have been paid. A week later, the agent informs you that the application is being reviewed, and the government officials have concerns about the research in light of its subject matter. The agent says he is a friend of the director of the permitting office and can make the problem go away with a modest cash payment to the director. You authorize the agent to pay the director and the research permit is then promptly issued. Was the indirect payment to the clerk a violation of the FCPA? Under these circumstances, this payment would likely qualify as a facilitating payment under the FCPA, since it is a one-time, small payment to obtain a routine, non-discretionary governmental service that you are entitled to receive. However, this payment may violate local laws of the foreign jurisdiction and may only be made if payment is consistent with the university's FCPA policy, including prior consultation with the Office of Legal Counsel. Was the payment to the director a violation of the FCPA and university policy? Yes. Since the payment was designed to corruptly influence a foreign official into improperly approving a permit, the payment to the director violates the FCPA and university policy. Issuance of the research permit was a discretionary act, and one that the government had expressed concerns about granting. 13. What are some ways I might mitigate the risk of violating the FCPA and otherwise comply with the university's FCPA policy? There are several risk mitigation strategies that you should consider when engaging in university activities involving foreign officials and foreign entities, including the following. Refer to the relevant financial services and procurement policies before engaging in purchasing or payment activity with foreign officials or foreign entities. Maintain accurate and current financial records of any payments to foreign officials, including detailed invoices and receipts. Consult with the Office of Legal Counsel when considering presenting a gift to a foreign official, noting that gifts to foreign officials must not be extraordinary and should solely be motivated to express esteem or gratitude. Gifts should be presented openly with transparency, and they should not be in the form of cash. When providing reasonable lodging or meals for a foreign official, pay the costs directly to vendors and do not give cash directly to the foreign official. Ensure that stipends are reasonable estimates of expected costs and do not provide any additional compensation or money to foreign officials. Do not condition payments on any specific action by a foreign official, and before engaging third parties that will interact with foreign officials and entities on behalf of the university, conduct due diligence to determine the third party's awareness and compliance with provisions of the FCPA and similar laws. Provide them with a copy of the university's FCPA policy and consider adding provisions to contracts stating that the contractor understands the prohibitions of the applicable anti-bribery laws and will ensure compliance with them, and that any payments to foreign officials on behalf of the university must be expressly authorized by the university. 14. Which university offices can help me should I have questions? For questions related to purchasing and payment-related policies and procedures, contact the Financial Services at 77370219444 or finserv-help@lists.uchicago.edu. For general questions, contact the Office of Legal Counsel at 7027237. Academic Policies and Requirements. Academic honesty and plagiarism. It is contrary to justice, academic integrity, and to the spirit of intellectual inquiry to submit another's statements or ideas as one's own work. To do so is plagiarism or cheating, offenses punishable under the university's disciplinary system. Because these offenses undercut the distinctive moral and intellectual character of the university, we take them very seriously. Proper acknowledgement of another's ideas, whether by direct quotation or paraphrase, is expected. In particular, if any written or electronic source is consulted and material is used from that source, directly or indirectly, the source should be identified by author, title, and page number, or by website and date accessed. Any doubts about what constitutes use should be addressed to the instructor. Academic fraud. Charges of academic fraud against students are subject to the university's policy on academic fraud, and the Office of the Provost determines that the regulations of the external sponsors are involved. In all other cases, charges of academic fraud against students are subject to this academic fraud policy only to the extent that they involve dissertations of students who have received their degrees, or work published or submitted for publication. Other charges of academic fraud by students are subject to the university's area disciplinary system. Degrees. Degree eligibility. To be eligible for any graduate degree, a student must complete a minimum of 3/4 of full-time residence in the university, or its equivalent. To be eligible for a degree from the college, a student must complete a minimum of 6/4. Degree application. Students who expect to receive a degree at the end of a quarter must file a degree application. This can be done through the MyUChicago portal except for Booth students, who should apply through the Booth student portal. The application for the degree should be filed before the beginning of the quarter but no later than the end of the first week of the quarter in which the degree is expected. A degree application is valid only for the quarter in which the application for the degree is made. The application must be filed even if degree plans are tentative. If the degree is not granted at the end of that quarter, reapplication must be made no later than the end of the first week in the next quarter in which a degree is expected. A cancellation fee will be charged for each degree application that is cancelled after the end of the 5th week of the quarter in which it is filed. Financial obligations and the awarding of a degree. Students are expected to settle all financial obligations to the university and clear all restrictions established by academic and administrative departments within the university, including current quarter tuition and fees, by the end of 9th week of autumn, winter, and spring quarters, and by the end of the 8th week of summer quarter. Should the 9th week of autumn quarter conclude with the Thanksgiving holidays, this deadline shall be the day before Thanksgiving. Doctoral students earning master's degrees in other programs. PhD students interested in pursuing a UChicago master's degree in a field other than their PhD program must discuss the process and requirements with their Dean of Students and the Dean of Students of the desired master's degree program if different. Understanding that there is no presumption that the master's degree in a different field will automatically be allowed, students should discuss options with their Dean of Students as early as possible upon considering the possibility. Most professional master's degree programs and MPCS will not allow PhD students to pursue a master's degree as part of a PhD program outside of official joint programs. UChicago master's degree as part of PhD program. Depending on doctoral program, students may earn a master's degree as part of their PhD program, and although the master's degree would generally be in the same field of study, it need not necessarily be in the same degree program as the doctorate. With appropriate approvals, PhD students may earn a UChicago master's degree in a closely allied PhD program in lieu of a master's degree in their own PhD program. Second UChicago master's degree during PhD program. Students who have been awarded a UChicago master's degree in their own PhD field as part of their progress towards the PhD may consider applying for a second master's degree under a separate process, where the second master's degree forms a coherent whole with the student's doctoral program. To protect the integrity of the university's degrees, the following conditions must be satisfied to award a second master's degree. The second master's program should form a coherent intellectual whole with the primary program. In the absence of a formal joint degree program approved by the Council of the Senate, there should be no overlap in the work used to satisfy the degree requirements. Before half of the course requirements for the second degree have been undertaken, the student's plan to obtain a second master's degree must be approved in writing by the dean or chair of the student's primary program and the student's area dean of students. The student must formally apply to the unit granting a second degree and receive written approval of acceptance into the program from the dean or chair of this unit, as well as from the area dean of students, if in a different division or school. There is no presupposition that such an application would be approved. After approval at the department and divisional level, the office of the provost must approve in writing the student's plan to obtain a second master's degree. Students with master's degrees from other institutions. Students coming to the university with a master's degree from another institution may receive a master's degree from the university in the same or a different field if they fulfill all the standard requirements for a University of Chicago master's degree while a student at the university. Dissertation requirements. Doctoral dissertations are original contributions to scholarship. As a condition for receipt of the doctorate, all students are required to execute a publication agreement with ProQuest UMI Dissertation Publishing granting ProQuest non-exclusive rights to reproduce, distribute, and sell their dissertations. If a dissertation includes copyrighted material beyond fair use, the author must obtain permission from the holder of the copyright. The public sharing of original dissertation research is a principle to which the university is deeply committed, and dissertations should be made available to the scholarly community at the University of Chicago and elsewhere in a timely manner. If dissertation authors are concerned that making their research publicly available might endanger research subjects or themselves, jeopardize a pending patent, complicate publication of a revised dissertation, or otherwise be unadvisable, they may, in consultation with faculty in their field, restrict access to their dissertation for a limited period of time according to the guidelines outlined by the dissertation office. If a dissertation author needs to renew an embargo at the end of its term or initiate an embargo after graduation, the author must contact the dissertation office with the embargo request. Embargo renewals may be approved only in rare instances, and in general no more than one renewal will be allowed. All dissertations must follow the instructions provided in the university-wide requirements for the Ph.D. dissertation, available from the dissertation office. On the first floor of the Joseph Regenstein Library. Registration for students in Ph.D. programs. To record the progress of students toward the Ph.D., the university requires full-time continuous registration. Students complete Ph.D. program requirements as established by individual academic units, and program requirements vary by department or school, but the requirement for continuous registration applies across the university. Ph.D. students must be enrolled for at least 300 units, including the option of research or advanced study. The choice to enroll in specific courses is made in accordance with program requirements and student scholarly needs, and Ph.D. tuition associated with registration is a fixed sum that is not altered by enrollment in specific courses. While registered, students may have access to student housing, library privileges, use of athletic facilities, eligibility for student health insurance and access to the services of the Student Health Service. And Student Counseling Service. If otherwise eligible to participate in federal student loan programs, registered students have the ability to borrow under federal student loan programs and to defer repayment of past federal student loans. Although some divisions and schools have shorter limits on registration, for most of the university's doctoral programs, to receive a Ph.D., students who matriculated prior to summer 2016 may register for up to 12 years from the date of their matriculation, and students who matriculated in summer 2016 or beyond may register for up to 9 years from the date of matriculation. Some divisions and schools have registration limits that are less than 9 and 12 years. Surprised face. Booth School of Business, see page 6 of the Ph.D. Program Guidebook. O Physical Sciences Division. O School of Social Service Administration. Leaves of absence may extend a student's eligibility to register beyond the time limits for students who matriculated in summer 2016 or beyond. To meet the full-time continuous registration requirement, students are required to be registered annually for at least 3 academic quarters, and some programs require registration during the summer quarter as well. Students may still be allowed to graduate after reaching their divisional or school registration limit with departmental and divisional permission. Satisfactory academic progress toward the doctorate, as determined by the specific programs, is required for continued registration. Academic programs may set a time limit on degree completion. Doctoral candidates who submit their approved dissertation by Friday of the first week of a quarter and apply to graduate in that quarter are not required to register as students in that quarter. If not registered, students would not be required to pay tuition or fees associated with registration and would therefore not have access to the privileges associated with student status. All students should consult with their area dean of students and, as applicable, advisors in the Office of International Affairs, before making the decision of whether to register in this case. Some divisions and schools may have earlier deadlines or other requirements, and students are required to follow divisional school guidelines in those cases. Students with questions about continuous registration requirements, time limits on registration eligibility, dissertation deposit timelines, and the impact of leaves of absence on registration time limits should consult with their area dean of students. Students with questions about continuous registration requirements, time limits on registration eligibility, dissertation deposit timelines, and the impact of leaves of absence on registration time limits should consult with their area dean of students. Pro forma status. Pro forma status is a limited privilege designed to provide full-time status to doctoral students who must move a substantial distance away from the Chicago area, in order to conduct dissertation research, archival research, or data collection for their dissertations. Engage in formal programs of intensive language training instruction abroad, as needed for completing their doctoral programs, or in the laboratory sciences, follow their primary faculty advisor who has moved to another institution. A student's choice to reside at a substantial distance from the university does not, in and of itself, qualify a student for pro forma status. Applications for pro forma status must be recommended by the student's academic department and approved by the area dean of students. Normally applicants for pro forma status already will have been admitted to candidacy for the Ph.D. Pro forma status can be approved for up to 1 academic year at a time. Applications for the renewal of pro forma status must be accompanied by a statement explaining why an extension is needed to carry out the objective as originally defined. In general, students may not be registered in pro forma status for more than a total of 2 academic years, except in the laboratory sciences, where there is no limit. Because the student life fee is not assessed for students registered in pro forma status, they do not have access to on-campus student health and counseling services for the period they are in pro forma. Doctoral students in pro forma must be enrolled for at least 300 units of research or advanced study during every quarter they are in pro forma registration status. Time limit administrative withdrawal. Students who matriculated prior to summer 2016 and who have not completed their Ph.D. after the elapse of 12 years will not be allowed to register in their degree programs. Students who have been admitted to candidacy by the end of 12 years will, however, still be allowed to graduate past the 12th year with their department and school or division's permission. Those students removed from their programs at the end of the 12th year that go on to complete and successfully defend their dissertations may be allowed to graduate. If the department accepts the dissertation and certifies that the student can demonstrate current knowledge of their field, the student will then be required to pay a graduation fee in the quarter they plan to graduate. Each department can define acceptable means of determining current knowledge. In order to ensure as few students as possible are removed from their programs at the end of the 12th year, students at the beginning of the 10th year of their programs will be required to submit a degree completion plan. Endorsed by their dissertation chair, to their departments and area deans of students. Students who matriculated in summer 2016 or beyond and who have not completed their Ph.D. after the elapse of 9 years will not be allowed to register in their degree programs. If they have been admitted to candidacy by the end of 9 years, however, they will still be allowed to graduate past the 9th year as described above. Leaves of absence. Ph.D. students may apply to their area dean of students for leaves of absence, subject to the conditions and procedures described below. Leaves of absence must be approved by an area dean of students. For students who matriculated prior to summer quarter 2016, leaves of absence do not extend their eligibility to register beyond the total of 12 years from entry into the Ph.D. program. For students who matriculated in summer quarter 2016 or after, leaves of absence can extend their eligibility to register beyond the total of 9 years from matriculation into a Ph.D. program. Availability of student health insurance during a leave of absence will be governed by the student health insurance policies at the time the leave is taken. Other university privileges, facilities, and services are not available to students on leaves of absence, unless otherwise indicated. Types of leaves of absence available to students in Ph.D. programs. Personal leave of absence. Students may apply for a personal leave of absence for any reason. A student may be approved by their dean of students for a leave of absence of up to 4 academic quarters. Medical leave of absence. Students may apply for a medical leave of absence if temporarily unable to continue in their program due to illness or injury. A student may be approved for a medical leave of absence by their dean of students for up to 4 academic quarters. Parental relief leave of absence. A student who becomes a parent during their doctoral program may request a 1/4 parental relief leave of absence to care for the new child, and pregnant students for whom it is medically necessary may request a parental relief leave of absence during pregnancy. Such leaves may be granted by the area dean of students of the student school or division. Students are still eligible for university privileges during a parental leave of absence. Military leave of absence. Students may apply for a military leave of absence in order to fulfill service in armed forces. This includes students from countries outside the United States who leave for service in their country's armed forces. Curricular degree leave of absence. Students may apply for a leave of absence to pursue another degree program that is integral to their Ph.D. The appropriateness, relevance, and length of time of the additional degree should be evaluated by the student's primary program and requires written endorsement by the program. A student may be approved by their dean of students for a curricular degree leave of absence for up to 3 years. Withdrawal from Ph.D. program. If a student decides not to complete the Ph.D., they must formally withdraw from the program in writing. To resume study after withdrawal requires reapplication to the program. Students who withdraw or are withdrawn from their programs and who subsequently are readmitted to their program must register retroactively for 3 of every 4 of the intervening quarters from the time of withdrawal until the time of resumption of study, or for all quarters from the time of withdrawal until the time of resumption of study, depending on the program requirements. The student must pay tuition at the rate that is current at the time of re-entry for retroactively registered quarters and a reinstatement fee of $150 per quarter for each of these quarters. Fellowship support is not guaranteed upon readmission. Restricted registration administrative withdrawal. The university has a system of continuous registration that requires all graduate students to be registered in some official status from the time of entry into the program until the degree is awarded. Following upon that requirement, students who are restricted and therefore cannot register must clear their restrictions by the end of the 5th week of the quarter, or they will be assessed a $250 continuous registration penalty fee. Any student who fails to clear all restrictions and become officially registered by the end of that same quarter will be administratively withdrawn from the university. A student who Has been administratively withdrawn from a Ph.D. program because of restriction and later wishes to resume study must apply for readmission. If readmitted, the student will be required to register retroactively for 3 of every 4 of the intervening quarters from the time of withdrawal until the time of resumption of study and will be charged tuition at the rate current at time of re-entry. In addition, the student will be required to pay a reinstatement fee of $150 per quarter for each of those quarters, plus the one-time continuous registration penalty fee of $250 which was previously assessed during the quarter of restriction. Transfer between academic units. A student who wishes to transfer from one department, division, or school of the university to another must submit a complete application to the new unit at the appropriate time of year to be reviewed for admission and funding by that unit. Administrative policies and requirements. Admissions. Area admissions review systems. Applicants to university degree programs with felony convictions policy and procedures. In cases when an applicant acknowledges having been found guilty or convicted of a felony, a committee composed as follows will be convened to evaluate the facts and determine if the applicant may be considered for admission at the University of Chicago. Dean of the Division School or his/her designee. Chair of the Departmental Admissions Committee, Head of the school's admissions operation, or his/her designee, and Dean of Students in the University. At least one member of the committee must be a faculty member. The committee may consult as needed with the Office of the General Counsel. At its discretion, the committee may ask the applicant for additional information to assist in its evaluation process. Applicants with felony convictions will not be per se disqualified from admission. Rather, in each instance and using reasoned judgment, the committee will assess all of the information available to it on a case-by-case basis, taking into consideration a variety of factors including but not limited to the nature and gravity of the offense, the time that has passed since the conviction, the applicant's age at the time of conviction, the surrounding circumstances, what the applicant has accomplished since the conviction, and the nature of the academic program to which the applicant has applied. Non-discrimination statement. Student health insurance policy. The university requires all registered students to carry adequate health insurance to cover, among other costs, hospitalization and outpatient diagnostic, testing and surgical procedures. Additionally, the insurance must cover medical care provided in the Chicago area for both emergency and routine, non-emergency medical situations. In keeping with this requirement, each year all students registered in an insurance-required program are enrolled in the university student health insurance plan. Students wishing to waive out of USHIP coverage must affirm possession of alternate comparable coverage before the enrollment waiver deadline. Students who do not enroll in or waive the student insurance plan by the deadline will by default be enrolled in USHIP and remain enrolled in USHIP through the end of the plan year, and thus will be responsible for the annual premium, which is billed quarterly. The information below pertains to university policy, based in part on requirements set forth by the insurance provider. However, the information below is not fully exhaustive of policies set forth by the insurance provider. Detailed information about the USHIP plan, including full policy details as set forth by the insurance provider, can be found at Eligibility. The university student health insurance plan generally is available to all registered students enrolled in programs that convene in the Hyde Park campus and their eligible dependents. Students in certain designated programs may not be eligible for coverage under USHIP. For additional information on specific university programs of study that are ineligible for insurance coverage under USHIP, students should contact their area dean of students' office or the registrar. Students in certain programs may be eligible to opt in to USHIP. Eligible dependents. Effective autumn quarter 2018, students are required to provide documentation to the university that establishes proof of a dependent relationship as defined in this policy. The types of acceptable documents and the instructions for submitting documentation will be provided at the time of enrollment in USHIP or can be found on the Student Insurance website. Students enrolled in USHIP can choose to cover eligible dependents, including same or opposite gender spouse or civil union partner, same gender domestic partner, children under the age of 26, including natural children, stepchildren, adopted children, or wards, any child named in a court order for whom you are legally responsible for providing coverage under the terms of a qualified medical child support order, and your eligible same-gender domestic partner's child who depends on you for support and lives with you in a regular parent-child relationship. Unmarried eligible children over age 26 if the child is incapable of self-sustaining employment due to a mental or physical disability that occurred before attaining age 26, is dependent on you or your eligible spouse, civil union partner, or same-gender domestic partner for primary support and maintenance and is covered continuously by the plan prior to and beyond age 26. Military veteran dependent children up to age 30 if the child has established residency in Illinois, served in the active or reserve components of the U.S. Armed Forces, and received a release of discharge other than a dishonorable discharge. Plan periods and premiums. The USHIP plan is an annual plan, dependent on quarterly student enrollment status. The plan year runs from September 1st to August 31st. The period in which a student is enrolled in USHIP is determined by the first quarter a student is actively registered at the university, each academic year, as follows. For students whose first quarter of registration is autumn, the plan period runs from September 1st through August 31st of the following year. For students whose first quarter of registration is winter, the plan period runs from January 1st to August 31st. For students whose first quarter of registration is spring, the plan period runs from the first day of spring quarter through August 31st. For students whose first quarter of registration is summer, the plan period runs from the first day of summer quarter through August 31st. Premiums are billed in 3 installments, generally on the autumn, winter, and spring quarterly bills. Regardless of which quarter a student enters the university, the spring quarter premium provides coverage from the start of spring quarter through August 31st. Students whose first quarter of enrollment is summer quarter will be billed for that period's premium on their summer bill. It should be noted that students in insurance-required programs are assessed a student life fee each quarter which provides access to student health and counseling services, from where students on USHIP must obtain referrals to seek care, per condition. Not per visit, outside of SHCS. Without a referral, a $50 non-referral fee will be reflected on the student's USHIP bill for each appointment provided outside of SHCS. Exception: if a student is residing more than 50 miles from the Hyde Park campus, a referral from SHCS is not required. For more information on the referral requirement, please refer to the USHIP plan brochure at. For more information on quarterly fees, including the student life fee as well as summer access to SHCS, visit Enrollment Waiver Deadline and Automatic Enrollment. The deadline to add dependents or waive USHIP is 5 p.m. Central Time on Friday of the third week of the student's first quarter of registration each academic year. Students who do not enroll in or waive USHIP coverage by the waiver deadline will be automatically enrolled in USHIP by default, will remain in USHIP for the remainder of the plan year, and will be responsible for the full cost of the insurance premium. This default enrollment is binding for the entire plan year. Students approved to register as a student after the insurance deadline must submit a manual insurance. Enrollment waiver application within 10 days of registration if they wish to waive USHIP coverage. Failure to do so will result in the student remaining enrolled in USHIP coverage for the remainder of the plan year. For more information about enrollment and waiver requirements, visit Waiver Requirements. A student who wishes to waive U-ship must provide proof of comparable coverage that meets university requirements and must show that the coverage is valid for the entire academic year. Students who wish to waive U-ship must do so each academic year. Waivers are subject to audit by the university to ensure the plan meets comparable coverage requirements. Binding coverage. The decision to enroll or waive U-ship coverage is binding for the remaining plan year, with the following exceptions. Students who graduate at the end of autumn or winter quarters will have their U-ship coverage terminated at the conclusion of the quarter in which they graduate. Students who are no longer actively registered in their program will have their U-ship coverage terminated at the conclusion of the last quarter in which they were actively enrolled in their program. However, any student who made a claim on their U-ship plan during a particular quarter must remain in U-ship for the remainder of that quarter, regardless of when their ineligibility becomes effective. U-ship premiums are non-refundable if a student has made claims on the plan at any point during that quarter, nor are premiums proratable. Mid-year changes. In certain special cases it may be necessary to change health insurance coverage during the middle of the plan year. Specific circumstances that may qualify for a change in insurance enrollment in the middle of the plan year include: loss of existing health insurance coverage, addition or loss of health insurance coverage as a result of a change in employment, change in coverage as a result of marriage, divorce, or change in domestic partnership status, need to add coverage due to the birth, adoption of a child, recent immigration of a dependent spouse, partner, or children. Petitions to add or waive coverage must be made within 31 days of the qualifying life event noted above. If moving from U-ship to an alternate plan, that plan must meet the university's comparable coverage requirements that are set for each academic year. Approved mid-year petitions to add coverage become effective on the day the previous insurance terminates, or the day after the postmark date of the petition, whichever is later. Students will be responsible for the full premium for the quarter in which the changed coverage takes effect. The premium is not prorated. Further information on mid-year changes can be found at Students on medical leaves of absence. Students participating in U-ship who take an approved leave of absence for medical reasons may continue coverage in U-ship for 4 quarters maximum while on a MLOA. If the MLOA crosses academic years, insurance coverage may be provided that crosses 2 separate plan years at the premium rates in effect during those plan periods. If the MLOA crosses academic years, the program administrator should make sure the MLOA is recorded in AIS for the new year. And the student must take action to enroll in U-ship for the new plan year before the current coverage is terminated so that there is no break in U-ship coverage while on the MLOA. Withdrawals and non-medical leaves of absence. Students who withdraw, take an approved leave of absence, or otherwise are not actively registered in their program of study are ineligible to remain covered under U-ship. If a student's registration status is changed to LOA at any point after 5 p.m. Central Time on Friday of the 3rd week of the quarter and the student was covered by U-ship up to the date of the leave, then even though the LOA is backdated effective to the start of the quarter, U-ship coverage will remain in place through the end of the quarter in which the LOA was processed, with any assessment for premium remaining in effect. Furthermore, any student who made a claim on their U-ship plan during a particular quarter must remain in U-ship for the remainder of that quarter, regardless of when the leave of absence or ineligibility becomes effective. U-ship premiums are non-refundable if a student has made claims on the plan at any point during that quarter, nor are premiums proratable. Continuation coverage. Upon termination of U-ship coverage, if a student was enrolled in U-ship for at least 6 consecutive months prior to termination, that student is eligible to enroll in continuation coverage for up to 3 months. Form available here. http wellness. Application is required directly through the insurance provider and may be facilitated by the on-campus insurance coordinators, located in the Woodlawn Social Services Center, room 368-370. Application and payment must be made within 31 days from the end of prior U-ship coverage. Opt-in programs. Due to the nature of the programs below, students in these programs do not go through the same U-ship enrollment waiver process and will not by default be enrolled in U-ship. However, students in these programs may opt into U-ship by purchasing coverage directly through United Healthcare. Booth School Evening and Part-Time Programs. Social Service Administration Evening and Postmaster's Certificate Programs. Harris Public Policy Part-Time Master's Program. Graham School of Continuing Studies, O. Master of Liberal Arts. O. Master of Science in Analytics, O. Master of Science in Threat and Response Management, O. Master of Science in Biomedical Informatics, O. Returning Scholars. Students in these programs are not assessed the student life fee and thus are not eligible to visit the Student Health Service or Student Counseling Service for a referral. Students who opt into U-ship are not required to receive a referral from SHCS prior to visiting a provider, and are not charged the $50 non-referral fee. Immunization requirements. By state of Illinois law, generally all new students are required to present proof of immunity from diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, rubella, measles, mumps, meningococcal disease for students under 22 years beginning in the fall of 2016. The university notifies all new students of the immunization requirement and provides forms and instructions for compliance. Information and forms are also available here. They may be returned by email to scsim@uchospitals.edu, by regular mail or in person. Faxed copies are not accepted. After the third Friday of the first quarter of registration, students who are not yet compliant will have their subsequent registrations restricted and will not have the restriction lifted until they have become compliant with the immunization requirement. Students who receive this notification are urged to call the Student Health Service at 773-702-4156 to resolve their immunization compliance status. For more information about the state of Illinois immunization law, visit Registration, Records, and Enrollment. The most current policies, rules, and requirements related to such matters as registration, grades, and graduation are available online at the divisions, schools, and college may also establish specific policies for their respective areas. Uniform drop-add deadline and census day. The university limits course drop-add activities to a period of no longer than 3 weeks from the first day of the quarter, permitting shorter periods as academic or professional units require. The university establishes the third business day of the fourth week as the quarter's official census day. Accordingly, student registration statuses and course registrations for the quarter must be completed by the end of the drop-add period. Course drops performed after the drop-add period expires are noted on the student transcript with a grade of W, and usually the late charge penalty fee is applied for any late adds. Restriction of student accounts and privileges. The university applies restrictions to students' university accounts in 2 categories. Category 1 restriction. Penalties are applied locally to students' accounts by the restricting office. The office placing the restriction will notify students of the penalty and its consequences. Category 1 restrictions will not interfere with the student's registration and enrollment in courses, but may affect the availability of services from that particular office. Category 2 restriction. Student Manual, University Policies and Regulations. Restriction notifications are posted on the My Alerts portlet of the portal. Students are responsible for regularly checking their alert status and contacting the restricting office as soon as possible to resolve the matter. In addition to the notification on the portal, students will receive an email communication from the restricting office. The frequency of these communications will vary depending on the office. The Office of the University Registrar also sends email notifications to students, summarizing all of their Category 2 restrictions, during key registration periods. Restrictions may interfere with a student's ability to bid on classes and register. It is the student's responsibility to clear restrictions as soon as possible. If a Category 2 restriction is unresolved by Friday of week 7 of the quarter, the student will be prohibited from requesting courses and/or pre-registering for courses for the upcoming quarter. In addition, a Category 2 restriction will also prohibit several university privileges and services. Prohibitions generally will include the ability to obtain official transcripts of academic records and grade reports, obtain official certification of student or alumni status, view academic and personal information on university administrative systems, obtain a new Chicago card, borrow materials from the libraries, access and use athletic facilities, access university housing, maintain valid parking permit. If a Category 2 restriction is cleared in the quarter it was imposed or before the end of the subsequent quarter, the student status will revert to an active student status. However, if it is not resolved